This was the first experience that I went through where we had this high number of victims and really this broad impact across the state.
Hi, and welcome to Cybereason's Malicious Life B-Sides. I'm REvil. A year ago, in a B-Side episode called Ransomware Attacks Don't Take Holidays, we told you the story of Kaseya, an IT solutions company that was breached on July 2nd, 2021, and its servers were used to spread ransomware to an estimated 800 to 1,500 small to medium-sized businesses. Kaseya's CEO said at the time that, quote, "We have about 150 people that have slept probably a grand total of 4 hours in the last 2 days, literally, and that will continue until everything is perfect as can be." End quote. Not a great way to spend the 4th of July holiday. Well, guess what? If you visit the FBI's most wanted cyber criminals list right now, you'll find there the roundish, serious-looking face of Yevgeny Igorevich Polyanin, a 30-years-old Russian man. Polyanin probably has a good reason for not smiling in his pictures. He has a $5 million prize on his head. Polyanin is part of REvil, the notorious ransomware group that was responsible, among other things, for Kaseya's breach. For this episode, Nate Nelson, our senior producer, spoke with Rich Murray, who leads the FBI's North Texas cyber unit, about how the Federal Bureau of Investigations dealt with another attack by REvil, this time against the Texas government, and how they managed to figure out who was behind the attack. Enjoy the interview.
Could you just describe for me the moment that you first heard about the attack that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so I learned about the attack on August 16th, 2019, the same day that it occurred here in the state of Texas. The information that I received was that there was a ransomware attack that had been initiated early that morning around 2:15 through a common vector of an IT services vendor, which turned out to be a managed service provider.
Are you familiar enough to say how exactly the attack chain worked that led to the compromise of that MSP?
The attacker was able to leverage a remote administration tool to push the ransomware down into that MSP's customer base, really raising exponentially the impact of that attack from just one victim to more than 20 victims and really 20 organizations.
Over those first few hours or maybe day or two, what did the destruction look like? Who had been attacked and how bad was the damage?
Cities were impacted. There at least was an impact to a water treatment facility that had to roll over to manual processes. There was a loss of ability to run criminal histories, which makes it really puts officers in a bad situation, because when they're going to encounter some individual, they're not able to access those records that determine, does a person have a warrant or do they have a violent criminal history. There was disruption in the computer-aided dispatch systems, and these are CAD for short. And these CAD systems really enable the responders to speed up the response. It allows the dispatchers to prioritize calls, to assign resources, to monitor the officers out in the field. Some of the officers in some of these affected municipalities had to resort to handwriting reports.
How were the officers, the government officials around them, reacting to all this?
Early on, the direction, because that there was some unknown information, right? There was concern that this might impact hundreds of organizations. So departments needed to respond the best they could. The guidance that was going out was to disconnect systems.
Systems like everything?
To give you one specific example, to some extent, the VoIP systems were disrupted, and so the word had to be pushed out to these departments to try and get these systems disconnected. And in one case, the information, the guidance to disconnect systems went into a dispatch center, who then relayed that to an officer. That the FBI had reported a cyber terrorist was attacking their systems, and they needed to disconnect the system. So that officer did as they were instructed, and went in and disconnected the systems at their department.
To be clear, the order to disconnect everything came from the FBI or from elsewhere?
Likely from the operations center, or perhaps the MSP. Certainly from the other side of the folks who were dealing with the remediation and mitigation aspect of the attack. Right, that allowed some of the organizations the ability to better recover, because the ransomware attack at this time did take hours and potentially days. So disconnecting was going to be an effective mitigation for some of these victims.
And so it seems like in the end, it really caught everyone off guard. Obviously the local police, the municipalities, government officials, and the FBI. Although I imagine that you guys are, you have some intel, you're monitoring threat activity. What was it that managed to catch you by such surprise?
Normally, we don't have advance warning. There was a time, though, that a telecommunications company that discovered that these bad guys were using a public website to stage some of their malware. And so that gave us some advance warning of when some of their attacks were going to happen. And so that telecom was able to pass that information to us, and we were able to make proactive notifications to victims in order to help them either mitigate partially or completely, an impending ransomware attack.
Local municipal governments have some systems going down. Police are unplugging all their computers. What is happening at the FBI at this early moment? Are you guys fielding calls? Are you trying to figure out what's going on? Are you helping victims?
Our involvement initiates on August 16th. And that's a Friday. That's a Friday afternoon. We have a computer scientist and an agent go out to the MSP that night to conduct an interview and collect digital evidence. They're out there until about 2 a.m. At the same time, the state had spun up an emergency operations center 24/7, and the FBI San Antonio office deployed agents over to that operations center so that we can have that seamless communication and coordination between state officials and the FBI. And then we also have FBI Dallas rolling out and engaging with that managed service provider to collect information on specifics behind the attack. We have a conference call that night around 10:30. And then, we're working through this over the weekend. We're making notifications up to FBI headquarters. We are, really kind of defining what our investigative strategy is going to be.
And, when you describe it like that, it sounds like an entire machine waking up and coming together, getting into motion. But, had you, Rich, experienced an event like this before? And did the FBI have a playbook for what happens if a ransomware attacker destroys like a swath of local government and police infrastructure?
We had experience with ransomware. We already had an ongoing investigation into another matter. But this was kind of the first experience that I went through where we had this number of this high number of victims, and really this broad impact across the state, and especially here in North Texas.
For those who haven't participated necessarily in a large-scale cyber response effort, can you explain why you needed so many field offices, so many agencies all participating in this, why there couldn't have just been a cyber response team that cleans up the issue?
The FBI model of investigating ransomware attacks and ransomware variants is to have one or a small group of FBI offices develop the subject matter expertise around that particular variant, and then lead the effort on that investigation. So in this particular case, right, we needed to figure out who was there already an existing investigation on this variant, and if not, should a case be opened? So we need FBI San Antonio to engage with state officials down at the operations center. We need FBI Dallas because we have that managed service provider in our area of responsibility. And then early on we had an FBI office get involved from the East Coast because we had we tentatively identified the variant as already being investigated by an office on the East Coast. As we gather more information, we found out that wasn't the case. So they were able to drop off, and we pair up with another FBI office who already had a case open on this variant. They had just opened a case based on an attack at an eye care facility, and that was the Jackson, Mississippi office. So FBI Dallas and FBI Jackson then pick up this investigation together and move forward.
How long does this whole search take as you jump from one field office over here to another? They have the information, they don't.
We receive information actually on the day of the event, later that night, from a private sector partner that the ransomware was Sonokibi, and which is also known as REvil. So, right away we're putting efforts into play to confirm that attribution.
And for those unfamiliar, can you just give me a background on REvil?
Yeah, so REvil is ransomware as a service. It has is in the ransomware as a service space. There's the administrators and the developers, really the technical know-how behind the variant model, and then there's affiliates, and these affiliates are really the kind of the subcontractors of this criminal enterprise to compromise organizations, and then they exfiltrate information out of the networks, and then encrypt the victims.
How do you go about discovering who was actually behind the attack?
Just like any other crime, that a bad guy may commit. These bad guys, these cyber threat actors, they leave a digital trail behind them. Take a bank robbery, for example, right? If a bank robber enters a bank, right, their image is going to show up on a camera. They may leave a fingerprint behind. They may have a co-conspirator out in the car. So these bad guys, they're getting on victim networks. They're communicating with the victims to try and negotiate a ransom. They're collecting ransoms. And all along this way, right, they're leaving a digital trail. And so, we come along and pick up each of those digital footprints or digital breadcrumbs that they leave behind, and examine them. And some of them are dead ends and don't leave us anywhere to go. But we pick up the next one and put those together. So over time, it took us more than a year, right, to determine the identity of the alleged perpetrator behind this attack. But eventually, we do make that identification.
Then after this whole long year of looking for the person who did this, whose face pops up on your desk?
We identify him as Yevgeny Polyanin. And Mr. Polyanin is believed to be in Russia, possibly Barnaul. And he was identified as being one of the Sodnokibi REvil ransomware affiliates. He's a 29-year-old male. He's wanted for his alleged involvement in ransomware attacks and money laundering activities.
The best strategy for organizations to avoid becoming a victim of ransomware is to prevent the attack from being successful in the first place. CyberReason remains undefeated in the fight against ransomware because it moved beyond alerting to deliver an operation-centric approach that detects and prevents ransomware attacks at the earliest stages of initial ingress and lateral movement. The CyberReason predictive response capability disrupts ransomware attacks prior to data exfiltration and long before the ransomware payload can be delivered. Visit cyberreason.com to learn more about predictive ransomware protection and how your organization can realize both increased efficiency and efficacy through an operation-centric approach to security operations.
Tell me how this story ends, how all of the players who were taken down come back to life, how long that process takes, and if there were any lasting consequences for the victim, the government, etc.
Yeah, so we did. The Department of Justice and the FBI did announce charges against Mr. Polyanin in a press conference. The Department of Justice did announce a seizure of funds that are alleged to have been used in connection with ransom payments and the money laundering activities. And in that case, we were able to seize over $6 million of cryptocurrency.
In a way, this story kind of reminds me of the Texas blackout, because here was this small provider, an MSP, which, if I recall correctly, was run by just a few people, providing infrastructure for all kinds of government and police agencies, and this single failure caused really widespread destruction. Do you, Rich, know whether this kind of arrangement exists elsewhere in America? Are other parts of the country vulnerable to attacks like this today, or have government agencies since this 2019 event learned from stories like this to become more fault tolerant?
I think one of the takeaways here, and this is back in 2019, and I think this has become more known over time, is really the vulnerability that a third party risk can present to our networks and our data, right? So, I think organizations are familiar with the need to secure their own data and their own networks, but in this day and age, with the sophisticated and the connectivity that we have between suppliers and vendors and partners, the nature of the supply chain aspect of these cyber attacks cannot be underestimated. We have to understand what's going on with those partners who have access or are providing to us some type of service, because if they get compromised and they have access into our networks, that does represent a vulnerability to our data. Anyone really is a possible target.
Rich, what do you take away from all of this?
Really, just one of the overarching takeaways that I took from this investigation is that when we do have the U.S. government agencies, when we do have the FBI field offices, when we do have our foreign partners and private sector, that when everyone adds their piece to the investigation, that we can find ways to disrupt the actors, whether it's FBI enabling an operation of a partner, or our partners enabling an operation that we can do. One of the new techniques that we were able to put into play in this in particular investigation was working with the Department of State. And the Department of State was able to get a reward announcement for Sodno-Kibi actors. And the State Department offered a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the identification or location of an individual who holds a key leadership position in Sodno-Kibi, and then another reward up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest and conviction of an individual conspiring to participate or conduct one of these Sodno-Kibi ransomware attacks. So that's to me the takeaway is there are in this cybersecurity community, there are so many people who are working to protect the networks, to secure the data and the operations. And there are many who are willing to step forward and help in an investigation and in an effort to disrupt these actors.
TK Music.